Good afternoon. Welcome to Broadband Breakfast Live Online for Wednesday, November 25th, 2020. My name is Drew Clark. I am the editor and publisher of Broadband Breakfast, and I'm very excited to introduce a awesome panel for our session today, which is part of our series. Getting some feedback, as might be expected. So always there are challenges and last minute things to sort out. So as I was just saying, this is one of our 5 sessions on tools for broadband deployment. We do Broadband Breakfast Live Online every Wednesday at 12 noon, have been doing it for almost 9 months, and we'll continue for the foreseeable future. And one of the series that we're doing right now is on these tools for broadband deployment, with a particular focus on rural America and how rural America can get faster deployment of a range of technologies with experts in the field, policymakers, companies, and technologists. So that is the format, that's the content. Now, just a little bit about our technology, if you will. We are, for the first time today, enabling a new technology where each of you, our audience, will be able to participate more than you have before. We've always had the chat and the ability for people to post questions, but now you'll be able to ask your questions. So if you're watching this on Broadband Breakfast or on any of our channels, including YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, you can register and participate even right now by going to broadbandbreakfast.com. The top story on the page is the post for this event. You can go to there and then click on the button and register, and you'll be in to our session. Now, we're going to ask those of you who are watching on our Zoom session to keep yourself off screen and muted until we get to the question and answer period, at which time you will be able to raise your hand and ask questions and participate. In the meantime, I want to turn once again to our topic and to the guests that we have. So I should also add that this series on tools for broadband deployment is sponsored by Adtran and Render Networks. We're very grateful for that support. And what we're trying to do in this series is to, as I said just a little bit earlier, talk about the tools that will enable companies that are seeking to build broadband, whether through a range of financing and funding, a lot of interest in the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, in the even from previously the Connect America Fund auctions, and those are obviously one of the funding sources that has been available. And of course, there's interest in potential new funding sources with broadband infrastructure. So those are just a couple of topics that we'll be addressing in the Q&A. Without any further ado, let me turn it over to Lori Sherwood, who is the Director of Commercial and Market Development for Render Networks. So Lori, can you hear me okay? Go ahead and dive right in and let's hear what you have to present to us.
Thanks, Drew. I'm pleased to be here today with such distinguished speakers. I also want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and a safe one as well. So to begin, I'd just like to take a moment to tell you a little bit about Render and what we do. Render offers customers a geospatial platform for construction management of broadband networks. Essentially, our role is to provide technology that enables networks to be deployed faster, more efficiently, and with higher quality than has been possible in years gone by. So my first slide is really just to show you a little bit about our background. Render is an Australian-based and founded company with a US focus. And currently, our customers are using our construction platform to deliver connectivity to more than 750,000 households and businesses across the US and Australia, and to streamline fiber and wireless network deployments. Currently, we're across 8 states in the US with a growing US team that includes myself, 5 others, located in Colorado, Virginia, Tennessee, and California. Now, Render was born about 7 years ago as a result of the National Broadband Network project for Australia. Render co-founder Dan Fleming was working on that project, which was incredibly large and complex. The construction rollout was traditionally paper-based and not going smoothly, and he and a few others thought there had to be a better way to manage construction. The best way to describe this is to really show you. So taking a sample project that covers about 50,000 plus premises with a combination of fixed and wireless networks. Consider what needs to be done to deliver each one of these assets, scoping the work in the design, allocating and scheduling work, material management, progress reporting, photo management, issues management, redlining, the list goes on, as-built, of course. Each of these logically involves data in some form. And then before you know it, and assuming that each transaction only occurs one time, a project of this scale results in over 1 million data transactions, likely involving multiple stakeholders, many crews that need access to the same source of data. And doing this all on paper is very difficult and time consuming. So what does this look like in the render world? Render uses 3 applications that have shared data and information. Hub is a high-level overview of the project. This is where you get your dashboards, your progress updates, and this can be customized for each customer depending on what your needs are. And for RDOF projects, we're working on developing dashboards that really have all the information you need for post-award reporting so that you can see this all in your hub. Scale is where work is managed. This is where you can see your design, zoom in and out to street level by task, segment, or network as a whole. And tickets is what the crews use in the field. Essentially, it's an iPad. Instead of taking construction drawings out to the field, crews only see work that's assigned to them. They log in to the app, they see their tasks, and they can walk through it as they complete the construction that day. It's the same view that administrative users will see in the Scale application. And construction crews capture what they're doing, including photos, answering questions, plugging in information through a series of prompts on an iPad so that it captures everything digitally, including as-built right in the field. When they're done with the task, you close it, you sync it, and then within minutes, it's shared across the platform. So what does this translate to? It translates to an improved customer service experience. Keeps wanting to go the wrong way. So in this example, you see an automated construction to customer connection workflow that does not require any paper or manual interactions and can be delivered in near time from left to right with the use of digital data flows. For example, in the construction aspect, field crews capture changes at the task level with mandatory data requirements, enabling consistent and accurate data to be collected at each step of the process, rather than marking up paper or PDFs, requiring manual post-processing and interpretation of handwriting. In the network operations phase, as-built data is delivered in real time directly from the field for downstream utilization. And as work is completed, you get an accurate representation of the network assets and any changes that have occurred throughout construction. So what's the outcome? The outcome is streamlined customer connections and significantly improved time to market. Network operators maintain an accurate record of the network from design to handover. And one critical point of success for our customer connection experience is bringing forward downstream requirements into the planning and scoping activities. And this is important because one critical point of success for our customer connection experience is bringing forward all of these together into one plan. So an important measure of success is the quality of the experience, which in large part is enabled or disabled by the quality of the data captured during the build. It is alarming how poorly at times this is done across our industry today. And we're proud of the time it takes to close out projects weeks instead of months that our customers and partners are achieving by heading this advice and embracing a digital approach. By doing so, specific downstream data requirements can be mapped to the as-built collection requirements of field crews, enabling systematic, consistent, and accurate data to be collected at each step of the process. The key is to keep it as simple as possible for the field crews and ensure the design process is fundamentally efficient and enables more work to be done every day. And so, as you can imagine, if you have a crew that is capturing the data that they're doing in the field while they're doing it, once they sync it up into the system, that is effectively creating an as-built. And so you can access these as-built reports on a daily basis if you want, on a weekly basis, as opposed to waiting until the end of the process and to gather all of the information from the field to then put it into the system to create that as-built network design. So quality matters. And one of our projects in Springfield, Missouri, the quality of this data has enabled their tier 1 provider to deliver customer connections faster than ever before. And we've gotten feedback that this is a first-class experience. And so using a digital geospatial approach can really transform how you manage these networks and how you deliver that customer experience. And so, Drew, with that, I will pass it along to you and I think Doug is following, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you so much, Lori. Many questions occur to me, but let's keep going with our next speaker. And for those of you who are joining, this is something new we're doing. We haven't had a interactive session on Zoom that we live stream. So we're going to ask those of you who are not panelists to take your video off, and we will make sure that we provide the opportunity for all of you to come on when you'd like to ask questions. So with that, let's go ahead and turn it over to Doug Dawson.
All right. Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen, Drew?
I sure can. And
okay,
actually,
very good.
Just let me take a minute and introduce Doug. I at least introduced Lori's title and her role at Render Network. She's told you more. I just want to say Doug is the founder and president of CCG Consulting, and he writes a fabulous blog called Pots and Pans, where he does something every day. And I'm often turning to the blog to see what his thoughts are on news of broadband. So with that, let's go ahead and turn it back to you, Doug, and hear your thoughts on this topic.
Very good. Today, first off, I want to tell you that I loved everything that Lori said, because what I'm going to tell you today is what we're actually doing in rural projects, which is far short of the wonderful scenario that she painted. And the product she just described is badly needed. Our company is a full service consulting company, and one of the things we do is project implementation, where we oversee the construction crews and just all that sort of getting things done in the field. And so what we have today is we have some pretty decent tools for pieces of what she has talked about, but we don't have any sort of integrated piece. For example, we've come a long way in the engineering process. Compared to 5 years ago, 80 to 90% of the engineering is automated to the point where we can decide very quickly what size fiber goes on every street. We can then, then the engineers get their hands in there and they can move the huts around to get the optimum network, and it all reconfigures itself. And so the engineering process has gotten very automated, and it's really great. And almost all the engineering companies in the industry use something like that, and it really makes a big difference. Where we fall down, which I'll get to on my second slide, is that does not translate very nicely into things like red lines in the field. We also have a really nice set of automated marketing processes nowadays. It all started with Google Maps, who started selling things by fiber hoods. Several other companies have copied that concept, and I have a number of clients using those. And so they're able to, take orders from customers many months ahead of construction. They're able to keep customers informed about what's going on. They're able to then let them know when it's time to come to their house and communicate with them in all sorts of ways: email, faxes, you name it, text messages, whatever the customer wants to do, that's all built into those. We also then have, some level, we've always had it in the BSS OSS system, some level of automated provisioning, which means, we can press a button and set up the data speed, set up the voice product, all those sort of things are automated. And so that's been around probably the longest of all the pieces of this. And so that's something that most of my ISP clients are pretty good at. Again, I just mentioned the customer communications. That's gotten a lot better. We've actually gotten really good at at the drop installation part, in that we know we used to have to send somebody out to every drop to look, and now we can look on the screen and go, this guy's 150 feet away. I've got to go under the concrete in one driveway. I know exactly, how much time that's going to take to do that guy, so that we've really, because of overlaying the design from the first stage of the engineering over Google Maps, we have a very good way of knowing ahead of time what has to be done. So that's really gotten a lot better. And we've gotten fairly good, at least for larger companies, at dispatch. If you have 4 or 5 technicians in the field, we're very good now with software that can decide who goes to the next open slot. We don't have to pre-assign all the customers to a guy at the beginning of the day. If technician A finishes early, then we send him to the next customer. That software can easily save 15 or 20% on miles on the trucks, and it saves on time. It gets customers installed faster. So we're getting very good at each of these piece parts, but they are not coordinated one bit from what Lori talked about. Each of these is a standalone system, and they don't really communicate with each other even one iota. That's right there. I've just showed you, 6 different automated processes we have. So we're not there yet. Construction is where we're really not there, and so I suspect, I would love what she's talking about for Springfield, Missouri. That's a fairly large project. It's got a fairly large, partner ISP. The problem we get into in rural construction is we don't know ahead of time usually who our construction crews are. And I don't want to insult anybody on the phone, but an awful lot of construction crews are dinosaurs. We have a hard time getting them to fill out timesheets, let alone come and do automated stuff. Companies who have their own construction crews, you can train them to do this. We have to get to the point where we have something like Lori's software, and we have to train them as part of this. The problem we have during these projects is, on a 2-year project, we might see 4 different sets of buried crews come in and out. We don't often keep a crew for the whole project. They come and they go, and so it really makes for a really tough thing. The part of our project that's absolutely the worst for this is make ready on poles. It's a 1 pole by 1 pole process. It's 80% of poles are fine. It's like, yep, no make ready needed. The ones where it's needed are just painful. It's really going to be hard to ever automate this to the level she talked about, because the electric company is going to have to participate, whoever the pole owner is, and all the other participants in the market. And I'm not sure that we can talk the other, the telephone and the cable company into helping us out there. And so that's a very painful process today. And then I have really no clients who do a good job of inventory management. There's systems out there. Guys go in, they take what they need, and nobody writes it down, and we have a terrible time keeping track of the dollars and knowing if we need to order something new. And so we're really not there yet on that. Those things have been there for many years. We just can't get anybody to use them. So we have those first page of stuff that we're halfway there. We have areas where we're not there at all. And then, what we can't forget in all this is what I call the human touch. Sales, scheduling, and customer service. As much as we want to automate things, we still have to leave room in there for people. My most successful clients have points in this whole provisioning sales process where somebody goes and talks to the customer. And so we have to make sure that any of these automated systems don't get so automated that we take out that human touch, because that is really what distinguishes the small quality ISP from the bigger guys. During this process of selling them, scheduling them, and installing them, they get to know somebody at the company. And, that's something that we just got to make sure that we don't get so automated that we forget to let that happen. Because, what I want is I want that customer to actually go, that's my technician. He's going to come to my house. This is my customer service rep I can call by name whenever I have a problem. So I love what Lori said. I think we're at the very beginning of that. I think it's awesome to hear that they're putting all that into a package, and I would love to work on a project that has that, quite honestly, because we struggle with every one of the things she says is automated now. So I look forward to that. So I think with that, I pass the baton on. And
well,
by the way, there's my contact for anyone who wants to see it. Check out my blog, Pots and Pans by CCG. I write every day. So.
And we will be happy to put these links onto the page here on Broadband Breakfast for those who have joined here since we began this episode of Broadband Breakfast Live Online. We're doing something a new way, unique and new way, in that we're enabling greater interaction, we hope, through those who have logged on, but we're also showing our audience on broadbandbreakfast.com, where you can find the historical videos that we've been doing for 9 months now, or almost 9 months. I want to turn it over, and just before I turn it over to our next speaker, Randy Luning, I want to just say that in this series on tools for broadband deployment, we talked about kind of the high-level rural broadband opportunity in our last session on October 21st. This one, we're talking about how to connect consumers and customers, or I should say, providers and customers faster. And we're talking about the tools that one needs, whether it's the asset management, the great layout that Lori provided about engineering, marketing, provisioning. All of these aspects are what we want to be talking about. Now, there's also another key component that fits into this, and we'll talk a little bit about this in this session just now, but also in other sessions, and that is, what's the role of mapping and analytics in understanding where you want to be? And so with that, I want to kind of kick it over now to our next speaker, who will talk a little bit about his work, Jay Randolph Luning of Signals Analytics and CBRStoolkit.com. So let's go ahead and turn it over to you to take it to our next step.
Great, thank you, Drew, and pleased to be here. And I know Broadband Breakfast is a great regular event, and I've watched just about participated in just about every one. So kudos to you, Drew. So basically, I wanted to speak a little bit about another type of tool, which is really the business planning tool at the front end. And just to give this some context, we have our entity that is tool focused, which is CBRStoolkit.com, is basically has 3 different suites of products that help someone essentially construct a business case up front. And the way to think about it is, before you buy Lori's tool and kind of commission a big effort there, anyone has to have a view that they're going to pursue the business and probably in a particular market. And if you look, for instance, in at RDOF, there are 61,766 block groups, which people can bid on. And most people are not going to wake up in the morning just knowing intuitively that it's 0155236 that is their bailiwick, and so there needs to be a process of filtering through that. So this is sort of very obvious, but why do we do business plans? One is for internal decision making, because most people want to use resources carefully. The other is for equity investors. If you're not a Fortune 50 company, chances are you have investors who have some interest in what you're doing or not. Debt investors and lenders. Also, with the RDOF process, there's a requirement for a letter of credit, where basically you need a bank or financial institution to come in and say, if this winner doesn't deliver the goods, we're going to stand there with a check to fill in the back. And so what's important about all of these things is that people are going to look at the quality of the data. And just the process, and I won't go through all of these things, but you start with a geography and probably go down to the neighborhood, and then eventually, ideally, end up with a set of pretty tight inputs for an engineering design tool. And so the goal of each of our suite of products is to help get you there. So I'm just going to show you a few visuals to they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. So hopefully this will make it congeal fairly quickly. This is one of our products. It's the RDOF toolkit, and this is a very simple visualization. You can see an underlying map. You can see the green areas, which are the the RDOF eligible areas, and then the white areas here that we have turned on are block groups where there's nothing to bid for, and then the earth is sort of spaces that are within a bidding area, but aren't actually eligible. And so this is, and what's interesting here is each tool has 30, 40, 50, 60, 80 layers that you can turn on, and they are sometimes colored layers that take over the screen. They're sometimes just numerical overlays, and I'll show you an example of that. Here is one application. Let's say if you were participating in RDOF and had a technology where your thought process, well, gee, for our technology to be economic, we don't want to consider any kind of area with fewer than 10 housing units per square kilometer. Okay, you can power up the tool and click that, and suddenly it filters out everything that doesn't meet that criteria. And you can have several simultaneous criteria. And so the areas that do meet it are the things that are not whited out, as an example. So this is a very simple kind of but powerful tool to start asking questions and zooming in on areas of interest. Once you do that, you'll then probably zoom in and turn on additional layers of data. So here we have full blocks and partial blocks with different color codes, and we have the number of housing units per block shown on top of each block. So with what the Federal Communications Commission provides in terms of data is, their estimate of the number of locations in a block group. And a block group often has a vast number of blocks. And so there's a ton of data that you would really like to have before you fire up your engineering team or even make an initial decision to pursue a particular market. Before you do that. Here's another related tool also for RDOF. So this shows all of the actual homes in yellow and businesses in orange. And if you turn it on, you can look at industry codes for the businesses. You can look at number of employees. You can look at square feet. A lot of businesses are small businesses, and a lot of them operate out of a home office, which probably doesn't need a broadband connection that's separate, from the home. And so that's encoded here too. So there's lots of layers of data here. And each of these are, like each of the residences is actually a real human being, and they have phone numbers and mortgages, and that's not all included in this package, but they're tagged to an ID code where there are vast numbers of fields of data that's available. So these aren't things that are put together from a satellite picture. There's competitive information. This is just a picture of fiber availability, and I like it because it's a pretty picture, but it also shows that when people deploy, it's not always something that blankets an entire neighborhood. This is from one of our first tools, which is a CBRS toolkit, which is about 10% on CBRS and about 90% on other things that are appropriate to any business. And here we've got population density and about 6 different income metrics and measures of need and business density and whether you've got single family homes or multi-tenant units, behavioral information. Also things like this is a picture here of food SNAP participation, or AKA food stamps. And this shows you, the federal government has programs like Lifeline for people who are low income. And this shows you a neighborhood where everyone is well fed. And then here suddenly where everyone is on food stamps. And so a lot of cities have this. So anyway, that's pretty much all I have, and we'll take questions later, but hopefully this is gives you an overview.
Yeah, no, that's great. A lot of wonderful slides there to show. So we're already beginning to see a couple of interactions that are taking place through the Zoom discussion, and we will go ahead and obviously those of you who are participating can see those and address them, and I will kind of point to some questions shortly. But I wanted to just pose a point for the three panelists here. So again, this is one of a series of events that we're doing on tools for broadband deployment and how we make sure that we get people attuned to the opportunities as they consider broadband deployments. And we talked about a lot of the programs in rural the last session we had, and we'll be talking about specifically about RDOF at our next one on December 16th. And I want to just point out, even though RDOF's auction's still going on, obviously lots of things aren't yet determined on that. I want to point out that we've been hearing from many experts who are attuned to broadband policy that the method of reverse auctions that was employed in the CAF2 auction and now being employed in RDOF 1 and will likely be employed in future ones, that may actually be a model that's potential for greater emulation if there's an infrastructure program of some sort in the new administration. So I want to basically just get each of the three of your take on what's the chronology. What do you need to do first, second, third? I think, again, each of you kind of come at it from a different point in the food chain, if you will. But I'd like to just get a common understanding, Lori and then Doug and Randy, what do you need to do first? What do you need to do next if you are wanting to tap into whether it's federal or state funds or just investor funds? What are the first, second, third steps to get going on? So Lori, your thoughts.
Sure. So I suspect we'll all have the same answer. I think Randy mentioned it, which is really it's all about planning. You have to know what you're doing. You have to have your financials, your all of that feasibility aspects completed first before you can embark down the road of pursuing these funds, because these application processes are onerous. Whether it's a state grant process, a reconnect grant, whether you're participating in the auction and you're going through a short form and then a long form, you can't be developing your feasibility documentation while you're doing the application. You have to have that done in advance and ready to go. I mean, that's really the most critical thing. And then as part of that planning, even in the early stages, you have to be thinking about your post-award deployment. Okay, well, what am I going to do if I get this money? And, one of the things that we're hearing about these days that is really going to become an issue is lack of demand or increased demand for resources and materials. For example, in the fiber world, we're hearing that there are delays right now of 26 to even 50 weeks for fiber. So if you don't already have your pipeline, if you haven't thought about it, if you haven't put that order in, that's going to make it a lot difficult for you to meet those post-award requirements. So it's all in the planning.
That's a great point, mentioning the delay in fiber. Very important for people to be aware of. Doug.
Yeah, it's all about the dollars. You better know right now ahead of time that you can make money at this. I mean, there's nothing sadder than to win a grant and then realize that you're going to lose money. And so you need to have, a business plan that is so detailed that you understand that at 40, 50, 60, 70% customer penetration, you're going to make money or not make money. So if you don't know that and understand that fully ahead of time, we've seen people go after grants that didn't make any sense. It's like, well, why did you go after that grant? They go, well, it was free money. Like, it's not free money if you lose money. So that those financial business plans, which can only be layered on top of good engineering, those two things together are the only way you can decide if this even makes sense. And that means you have to start early. You got to, this stuff takes a while. There's not only a crunch in construction crews, there's a crunch in consultants who can help you with that stuff. We're all busy, 7 days a week, and you can't go out 3 weeks before a grant and find somebody to help you decide whether you should go for it or not. I mean, you better be starting 6 months or 9 months ahead of time. And so, that we warn people, and we say no a lot to folks. They get very disappointed. Can you help us? Sorry, no, we already have 10 people we're helping. And so, there's a limited number of us. There's also a big crunch now. The third crunch is construction crews. We are now seeing a shortage of construction crews. So, even if I order the fiber, can I get enough folks in here to get this thing built? The industry is getting busy. It's an interesting time. So
Doug, let me just ask you a question. Of the people who approach you and say, hey, I need a consultant to help navigate this process, how many of them, like where are they typically in the process? Have they done some degree of financial, geospatial analysis, or are they kind of coming in without that and other steps having been done?
About half have done nothing. The other half have already gone through an engineering firm, so they've done the geospatial. They know where they want to go, and then they come to me to finish the number part. Can they make money at it? So, and I work with a number of other engineering firms, so they do that first, and then they contact me. And quite honestly, because those engineering firms have already done first legwork, I take those customers first. They're already halfway there, right? The guys who call in from scratch going, I think I want a grant, and you go, where? And they go, I don't know. They're a little hard to help because it's like, gee, this is going to be expensive. So, so it's if they have done their homework first, they're much more likely to get our attention. So, yeah.
Great. It's a good lead into Randy. What's your response to this question about first, second, third steps?
Yeah, so I would say one of the first steps is decide, are you approaching the market as a company that does a particular technology? Like, some people are doing fiber, period, or others may do fixed wireless access. And so if you look at an opportunity like RDOF, there's essentially sort of a bell curve of densities in which each technology really makes sense, at least in an unsubsidized perspective. With enough subsidy, anything can be done. But if you also look at things like CAF2, there were certain portions that went to satellite simply because they were just so sparse, you couldn't possibly serve them reasonably in any other way. And so, so basically, so that's a one very important component. Another piece is in one of the unique qualities with RDOF is they gave you not only a geography, but they also said, here are the number of locations that we believe are there. And that's actually very unusual. If you look at a spectrum auction or most other business cases, no one tells you how many customers are going to show up. But what's interesting is the CAF, the location numbers are not always accurate either. And particularly in our analysis at the low end, they're oftentimes overstated. And so or we believe that they're overstated, based on, all of the due diligence with our tool, and we have a white paper on that. And so one of the things is, as you select markets, to do some independent research that says, do I believe in the underlying demographics, and where does it fall relative to sort of published data sets? And then I guess thirdly is, implementation issues. For instance, a lot of our RDOF markets, you'll have blocks that are actually separated by large distances. And it's one thing to build a fiber network for a whole bunch of people that are clustered together. It's something very different to build it if they're in 20 different small locations within a much larger space, or with any technology. And so that's a very important consideration.
Let's talk in a moment about technology and different choices, but we want to encourage your questions and take them when we have them. We do have one from Mark Zarnecki. For a state or region, what and how are tradesmen getting schooled for this type of employment opportunity? I think that's referring to the discussion we were having about construction crews. So let's actually get all of your reaction on this, because this is crucial. Obviously, this series and this session, we're drilling into the details here. How do you actually get this thing done? And you need person power to do it. So Lori first, and then the others, to tell us a little bit about kind of the human capital, right? The human need in constructing broadband, particularly fiber networks, Lori.
Right. No, it is definitely crew intensive. I think Doug mentioned not only are there material shortages, but there's crew shortages as well. And you're finding, crews that will go from one area to another, project to project. It is definitely an issue. And, I want to say that we actually just this morning, I was on a training call for a project we're doing in the Arizona desert. And it's with a cooperative, and we were training some guys, and they are actually very, it's not as much of a barrier to deployment as you might think. to train them to use these tools because they're intuitive. And when you get right down to it, yes, they're used to using paper, but these tools are making their lives easier. And I was chatting recently with a Reconnect award winner who was telling me that they just underwent a federal audit of another project that they're doing, and they spent an hour and a half with the auditors discussing the waste factor for zip ties in the field and whether or not construction crews were dropping these in the field, and how are they going to account for the loss of zip ties. And
just
so
make sure we all are familiar. What is a zip tie, Lori?
It's what, we use it in our houses. It's literally, just something that you can use to attach things. It's about the least expensive of all of the equipment and materials used on a build. But the point is that in order to capture and these materials and account for them, and it really does make your life easier to use a digital solution and digital tools. But the human element is obviously, it's a very human intensive project, and as you know, humans are the weak link in the chain, and so which is why we're trying to make this as easy as possible for everyone to do that. So.
Great, thank you. Doug and Randy, any thoughts on this point?
I do. There is a very interesting dynamic in work crews. You will, first off, in most areas of the country, like where she's working in Arizona, there's going to be some folks who want to work where they live. And so they may not be exactly in that market, but they're going to be from nearby. And you can kind of count on those crews because people don't really like living in trailers 12 months a year to go do this. But if you get a sizable project, it's very hard to get all local people to do it. So you end up with a part of the crew who's local, a part of the crew that's not local. And I'm seeing a real problem with the non-local folks. We've always, I hope no one's insulted by this, but we always call these broadband gypsies. They come and they go. And it's getting so hard that there is so much competition for those guys, and the prices are going up for them, that we've had crews that just walk out. They're there on Friday and they're not there on Monday because somebody made them a better offer to pay $1 more an hour for a project in another state, and they're gone. They don't even tell you they're gone. On Monday, it's like, where's the buried crew? They're not here. And so it's getting to be a real problem for an extended project, a 2, 3, 4 year project, to even, you can't really count on those folks. We've never had that problem before. We never had that problem 3 years ago, but I've had that problem happen 6 or 8 times this year where crews disappeared on me. And once you find out that they were outbid, or in one case, somebody hired them as a local crew somewhere else. It's like they gave them full-time jobs. They left their project and they went somewhere else. So it's becoming a challenge to keep people. The local crews are great, but can't normally get enough of those to do everything. So
that story prompts me to remember a scene from a movie that I encourage all of you and our watchers as well to watch. It's called The Hummingbird Project. Have any of you heard of this movie or seen it? Mm-hmm. It's a hilarious film that's in some way based upon a real story of someone trying to build a fiber connection from St. Louis to Jersey City. And he's basically just, to cut off, 20 milliseconds on the trading floor time. And in one of the scenes that's almost at the climax of the movie, the guy's crew gets stolen, bought off by a rival project. And we even get a little bit of the fiber versus wireless competition in that movie. So, Randy, do you want to say anything on this? We certainly want to encourage our watchers to ask questions, either via the chat, or if you'd like to pose the question yourself, just write question in the chat box and we'll get to you. Otherwise, I want to move to another topic.
So, I was just going to make a really simple point that normally at the front end of the process, it's very labor light. In other words, it happens quickly and learning curves are not that steep. And then it gets, much, much steeper, obviously, in implementation. And I think there's a contrast here, and to be expected as any project progresses.
All right. Well, let's talk just a little bit about the technological choice, if you will, that we have, and in particular, we are seeing less of the divisions between fiber and wireless as a technology. More and more, we're basically understanding there's going to be components of each in most projects. But I do want to ask, Lori, is it fair to characterize the render tool and system for fiber deployments? Could you also speak about wireless components of project? And likewise, I want to ask Randy the same question. I mean, you actually, you're marketing CBRS toolkit. Obviously, CBRS stands for Citizens Broadband Radio Service. It's a wireless band, but I'm understanding you to say that, well, no, we will help in fiber as well as wireless. So I'd love both of your takes, and then Doug, you can chime in at the end of that question.
So the render solution is technology agnostic. It works for fiber, wireless, a combination of both. For tower deployments, at the heart and soul of render, it's a task-based approach. And so, we create those task dependencies and definitions with a customer, and we can. The technology does not matter essentially. So we use those tools for all types of projects. And so it's because that's where we are today, right? We're not like, as you pointed out, we're not strictly 100% fiber wireless, where it's a combination of technologies.
So just to be clear on that, the task-based aspects will work. I mean, at what point does one say, okay, I know I want to do a project, but I'm not necessarily sure which parts are fiber, which parts are wireless? Do I feed that into the tool of render, or do I need some additional kind of tools to kind of get there?
So Render's not a design company. We're not a construction company. We have a software as a service platform that bridges the gap between the engineering and the construction deployment and sits on top of it. And what we do is we take a final design, usually it's a geospatial design, and we ingest it into the render platform and system. And so as we're ingesting it, we're creating these tasks, dependencies, so that, for example, the first task would be permitting, right? Then it would be followed by electric make ready, and aerial cable, and underground vault, and conduit placement, and then fiber and splicing, et cetera. So that the end result is that you're never allocating anything to be released to a construction crew that the dependency hasn't already been done. So you're not sending splicers out in the field before the cable is placed, which really helps to create efficiencies. So you're not just keeping crews idle, to Doug's point, so they don't walk off on the job. You're maximizing your effort there. And then as soon as something is completed, that is a dependency, then the future tasks will be released. So it's sort of an automated process to that extent. But how we create those task dependencies and what we call them is up to the project owner and the engineering firm. And so we can do this for fiber, for wireless, using the same methodology.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I think that really helps give a picture. Randy, what's your response on the twist for you?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I would say as well that we are technology neutral, and not only technology neutral, but fixed versus mobile neutral. So for instance, in the CBRS toolkit, it has a complete data set for fixed competition and another data set for mobile competition, because CBRS can actually be used either way. In RDOF, it's obviously a competition among people providing fixed services. So all of the data sets are oriented that way. But we also have, for instance, in our location analyzer product, we actually have some elevation data. And the idea there is if you're going in, say, doing fixed wireless and just wanted to know that there's not a mountain blocking the link between your proposed site and your destination, you can see that it doesn't even remotely replace a real radio planning tool, but it does that. And it's also, we're hoping helpful to say someone who's doing fiber and expects a short drop, but actually there's a 200 foot cliff, so you can see that kind of stuff.
Great. Doug, do you want to add anything to this?
I do, because these grants are great, but you got to remember that the vast majority of construction processes don't necessarily include grant money. And so what is normally the limiting factor for somebody is money. And so And so once we know what somebody can raise at the bank, we've come back and go, well, let's build fiber to these clusters, let's do wireless to the rest, and let's get a 10-year plan to finally get fiber everywhere. So that's the approach that we've always taken. Grant money can obviously speed up the fiber piece of it, but there's plenty of folks who have tackled these projects with a limited number of money. I can raise $4 million. Well, let's see what we can do with that. And so that, that becomes our limiting factor that we work backwards from. Let's get as much fiber in the ground as we need. Let's definitely connect all the wireless towers. Let's get as many roads of people that we can connect, directly with fiber on day one. And then let's do wireless for the rest. And let's get a migration plan to get there. So there's been a lot of folks who have that start with the mix with the long-term goal to get to all fiber. And a lot of those folks never got any grant money. Grant money's not available everywhere. There's plenty of spots that Randy showed on the maps that don't have grant money. And so, so we've worked on tons of those projects, and they will hopefully get the fiber eventually. It might be 20 years for some of them, but they'll get there. So
we've got another question from Pulkit Bhatnagar from one of our other platforms. He says, as Doug mentioned, most bidders or grant recipients for FCC and USDA money should have finalized their consultants, contractors by the time they get funds. But what if they haven't? Any suggestions? I'm sure each of you will have some good thoughts on that. Let's start with you, Doug.
Well, I first off would say that nowadays, because of the backlog of ordering fiber, you better have done at least a little bit. But if you're getting a 6-year RDOF grant, you have time to go out and find the people. Quite honestly, if you have 6 years to build it. So if you don't really know who your engineer is yet, I mean, you may have your design done, but not know your construction engineer. The state grants are a lot less forgiving. State grants may say you have to build it in a year. You better be completely ready for those projects. The longest state grants I know of only allow you 2 years. So you don't have that option of not being ready. But I know folks who got reconnect grants who were not ready. I mean, they're still going to finish.
But they still could do it.
They're still going to get it done on time. However, as the industry gets busier, they might find themselves unable to find somebody. I don't recommend it. So,
well, and for Lori, let me actually step back. Put aside RDOF. I mean, CAF too. I mean, I'm understanding that there are a lot of people who receive Connect America Fund Phase 2 grants, which use the same reverse auction system, substantially lower funds available. And they've been trying to make their builds. Sometimes they have challenges. Talk a little bit about Render's experience with some of those CAF 2 awardees, Lori.
Yeah, no, thanks, Drew. That's a great point. Now, next year, you're coming up on the milestones for CAF 2 for next year for the first set of build requirements. And we've talked with some companies who have realized, we haven't been as efficient over the last 2 years in building out. We've focused all of our time on getting the permitting done, and we haven't started the construction, and now there's a panic setting in. And so, so making sure that deployment, schedule meets your timeframes is critical. And, the RDOF rules are very similar to CAF. So you're going to have the same types of challenges and deployment plan to meet those milestones that are coming up. And there's many more as well with the hub reporting and annual reports. And there's no such thing as free money. And with the other thing too, we've seen a lot of folks that had to turn down CARES Act money. That a lot of that was being pushed out to try and connect some of these unserved folks or underserved people that suddenly realized overnight that they didn't have the bandwidth necessary to work from home and school from home. But the CARES Act money has to be spent by the end of this calendar year. And so there's a lot of money left on the table of projects that just weren't able to get that ramp up, at the snap of the fingers.
Very interesting. I want to actually ask another question that's come in from Mark Zarnecki to everyone, and I want to direct it to Randy. He says, for a realtor, how could they effectively assure a new construction home buyer that fiber can and will be available, i.e. the proximity to fiber? And this ties into maybe some features in broadband mapping that aren't necessarily thought of, but should be, right? Because we can't just think about an availability metric. We also have to think about, speeds, prices, connections, how you can connect. So Randy, talk a little about fiber mapping and the public and not so public sides of that as it relates to this broader conversation, Mark's question in particular?
Sure. No, I think that's a great question. One of the very interesting metrics is you can look at a neighborhood and you can look at the average age of the the buildings, and knowing the average age, you can actually know what kind of technologies are likely to be there. But I guess the very simple answer for that is, one, put in fiber. If you're building a neighborhood, put in fiber, put in twisted pair, but fiber in particular. And also what's very important is the economics of deployment can change significantly when you go into multi-tenant units. And like one of the business planning dimensions in our tool looks at just the ratio of single family homes to MTUs, and something, and a region or even a neighborhood that's MTU dense is extremely attractive.
Well,
I have a very different
please.
answer to that question.
Yeah.
The question is, how do you find who has fiber? It turns out states have a big role there. North Carolina, the state broadband office actually has a map of not only what is fiber today, but what is planned for fiber. And then we actually thought about moving out to the country, and so we started calling the ISPs on that map, and it's like, how fast are you actually going to get to those areas? And because they're CAF2 reverse auction areas, they're going like 3 years. It's like, do I buy here or I don't buy there? But if the state hadn't done that, it's very hard for a realtor or anyone in the public to figure this out of what's there and what's not there. The map here was awesome. I know a couple other states have that as well, but that, it takes somebody to collate all of that stuff from all those various ISPs and put on a map. And in fact, I've never seen that other than about 3 states. I mean, there may be 20 of those, but that's the only ones. I happen to live in a state that has it, but
and even just a footnote to that too is, there's a distinction between, local fiber and middle mile fiber. In a lot of states, there's been a big effort to fund and deploy middle mile fiber, which is absolutely critical, and it's an enabler for any kind of local deployment. So I think I wholeheartedly agree with your point there.
So I actually have a final question that I want to ask each of you, but before we do, I want to just emphasize and thank our audience who is watching either on broadbandbreakfast.com or one of our channels. A reminder that we are going to be doing this going forward. That is to say, sign up and you'll be able to participate, ask questions, like we've had several people ask questions. I want to thank our sponsors for this series, Adtran and Render Networks. The next one in this series will be December 16th on tools for broadband deployment, RDOF, and other broadband deployments. But next week, we're going to be talking about broadband and the Biden administration. We did one of those a month ago, and we'll do another one next week. And then on December 9th, we'll have our 5G session, and that will be devoted to local rights of way and the 5G Rural Fund. So let me actually ask our final question to each of our panelists, and let's go in the order we started with, Lori and Doug and Randy. And I want to basically ask, I have heard estimates, these are not fresh, so they may not be good, but if we wanted to do broadband to everywhere in fiber, everywhere in the country, okay, now maybe there's going to be that, 3% that is not cost effective. And Lori, I know, from the experience following the Australian National Broadband Network that there was some effort to get something like that. 93%, I believe, is the figure with fiber, and then there's another component, wireless. But if America was to say this is an urgent priority to get fiber as many places as we possibly can, and there were the funding to go with it, so it's hypothetical. What would you, each of you, Lori, Doug, and Randy, advise the government to do to plan that well? So now we're flipping from a builder to the government and what approach they should take to facilitate an economic and efficient rollout of fiber to as many places as possible. So that's my final question, and any additional thoughts you have. And again, let's hear from Lori first on this.
Yeah, I think that the strategies that so far have been that are being undertaken, there's no one perfect way to do this, and in part because it relies on accurate mapping, which we all know we don't have an accurate national broadband map. But that being said, there's going to be billions of dollars flooded into the marketplace for broadband connectivity over the next couple years or more. I know this morning there was an article the Biden administration is looking at that being pushed out, whether it's another CARES Act part 2 or something standalone. And, states are really taking this up as well. There just needs to be some type of coordination. I mean, we had a national broadband plan 10 years ago. Maybe it's time to revisit that and come up with sort of a national strategy to efficiently utilize those funds and make sure that they're being put in the right areas. But I think, we're on the right track with these census blocks. We know roughly where the biggest gaps are in terms of unserved areas. It's really getting those underserved communities. That's the challenge, that are somewhere in between.
Doug.
Mike, I've thought about this a lot and I've written about it a lot. The problem, the scary problem we have is if they try to go too fast. They just can't throw $40 billion at the problem because we can't absorb it. There's not enough consultants, work crews, engineers, or anybody around to build that fast. And so it's got to be if we really want to get broadband everywhere, it's got to be a well thought out 10-year program. Because if we try to go too fast, it's going to be an absolute disaster, and a whole lot of folks are going to get poorly built broadband that doesn't work. And we need ISPs too. We can't just go, here's money for broadband. Like, well, where are the ISPs? So we have to have all of those pieces in place, and that takes time and money. And even free money doesn't get you a good ISP in the middle of Appalachia, West Virginia. There's only 1 or 2 ISPs in the whole state. And so it's like, well, who's going to do this thing? So we really have to have a step-by-step program. I kind of like the idea of bringing the states in because each of them has a very different need, and let them figure out how to get that money put out. Because if we do it too fast, it could be one of the worst. We could end up spending $100 billion and still only have half the country served. And so that worries the heck out of me. So.
Very thoughtful point. Thank you, Doug. Brandy, give you the final word for our program today.
Yeah, so a couple thoughts. One is I would focus on middle mile solutions, because I think before you can deploy the last mile, you absolutely need something for that local network to connect to, and that doesn't exist everywhere. Although a lot of states have put a lot of effort into that. So that's number one. The second thing is, rather than going for 100%, I would go for 99.9%, because even with things like a mobile broadband network, if you try to cover every square inch of a state, particularly a Western state, mission impossible. It's very, very expensive. And the costs there are a fraction of doing fiber. But I think what you can do is you can get statistically very close to 100%, and maybe use low Earth orbit satellite as an example to nip off the people that are just really in the very remote areas. But don't try to. If you do try for 100%, it becomes unachievable.
Well, thank you again. Thank you to Lori, to Doug, and to Randy for your comments. We will see you again next Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern, and hope everyone has a wonderful and safe Thanksgiving.